Welcome back, everybody. Today we've got another piece of hardware I picked up because it seems like I just buy networking hardware all the time at work these days. And this is a Mikrotik CCR2004 1G12S plus 2XS, which is a mouthful. I wish their names were easier. So in here we have our accessories consist of 2 AC power cords, rack ears, screws, feet, and a little Mikrotik sticker. I like that. I don't think I've seen that in any of these kits before. So there's a little Mikrotik sticker and a little not trash sticker, I guess, for whatever it's replacing. Mikrotik, routing the world. I may have to keep the sticker. Little booklet. This is a new one. English quick start guide. I wish the print was a little bit bigger. This is a bit tricky to read, but basically they've got your first steps list, your safety information. There's a QR code where you can scan. In fact, let's scan that now and see where that takes me. I can see something good already on the QR code is that the QR codes are at least language keyed. So let's scan that. And it directs me to enter the name of the product located on the case to find the user manual. Well, that's a bummer. So it brings me to a page that will get me to the user manual, but it doesn't bring me directly to the user manual. I don't know why they do them that way. All right, nothing else in there. There's that piece of foam on the front. And all right, so this is a little bit different than the 1036 units it will be working alongside. And a little bit of backstory there. So we took apart some 1036 units a while ago, and there's nothing wrong with them. They're doing everything that they should. What ended up happening was they were supposed to go in alongside some Cisco hardware. So we had a pair of ISRs and a pair of ASAs. And the ISRs were capped at 100 meg line rate. And there was a software license that we could buy from Cisco to unlock them. That software license cost more than the CCR 1036 units did. So we made the decision that they're just handling BGP. We'll get the 1036s, which are honestly 10 times as much hardware as I needed for that particular site. And then came the question, and then they went in, and lo and behold, the ASA was limited to 200 megs a second for what it considered mixed traffic, which meant if the ASA was routing TCP and UDP traffic at the same time, it was limited to 200 megs a second. So what should have been a dual redundant network, as in 2 ISPs, 2 BGP routers, 2 firewalls, ended up getting flattened into 2 ISPs, 1 BGP router, and 1 firewall. So the 2004 here, in my particular application, is just going to end up being the BGP router. And I've made that decision based on the fact that, honestly, the 1036 units don't break a sweat when they're doing VPN traffic. And they're far larger than I need for the BGP, so I think this is going to be a better fit. So this is, as I mentioned, a 2004 1G12S, and this is quite an interesting design. I haven't seen one like this on one of their routers recently. So I've got 12 SFP plus ports on the front, and I have 2 gigabit ports. One's console, so it's probably not actually gigabit, One is a management boot and boot port. This, they included in their port count. You don't really typically use the management port for anything. And then over on the left here, we have two 25 gig SFP28 ports. So I'm going to need a couple of SR 10J or 10 plus units to turn some of these 1 gig ports into 10G base T, or some direct attach cables to talk to the 1036 unit, which is what I'll probably do. I'll probably do direct attach from here to the 1036, and then 10G base T from here to the ISP, since my ISP terminates with gigabit Ethernet. But this is, as the 1016 we looked at, full copper. However, it did not include, like the 1016 did, a gigabit transceiver, probably due to the presence of this management port, which you could use. I don't want to. I want my management port left open. Taking a look around, fairly light. We've got a big heatsink on the back. That should allow it to run in a nearly fanless configuration for most of the time. Although I do see what appears to be 2 fans on the back. That's a first as well from Mikrotik. The 1036 was left to right. This is actually optimized for front to back cooling, which is not something I've seen them do before. And I'm glad to see them do that. We've got that. We've got something that we've seen fairly often on Mikrotik. Not every device we've looked at has had this, but this is dual AC power. Now this is one of those things that I have to say in the context of the price. So this CCR2004, I think it is like $600. Let's just double check it real quick. Yeah, $620 on Amazon Prime today. Having dual power supplies at all in a $600 router is a big deal. The fact that they're not hot swap sucks, but is just one of those things that has to be done to keep this at its target price point. I would obviously prefer that they move to hot swap power supplies, but I understand why they haven't. And one of these days, eventually, someone else will, and Mikrotik will, be forced to do so in order to compete. In the meantime, there's not a whole lot of options for a combo 10 and 25 gig firewall at the $600 price point in the first place. That not having hot swap power supplies is a big deal. Honestly, a lot of the Mikrotik gear is so cheap. Honestly, a lot of the Mikrotik gear is so inexpensive that if you were concerned about something like that, it would be to your benefit simply to buy an extra one, leave it on the shelf so that you can throw it in the rack if and when one of these fails, and then you can swap the power supply out in the unit that you've taken out. All of that said, let's go ahead and start getting inside. Looks like I've got one screw here, and then I see 3 on the back. There are additional screws on the back that I'm not taking out just yet that connect to the power supply and fans. I don't have any real reason to remove those, or sorry, connect to the heat sink and fans. I don't have any reason to remove those yet. Power consumption must be fairly reasonable on this. The power supplies themselves are both marked 100 to 240 volt, 1 amp max. And we'll check the spec page in just a minute. In the meantime, let's see what's inside here. Wow. Okay. So I have 2 fans. that are attached to this massive heatsink. I have, that's interesting, I have 5 packages that would be DRAM. I wonder if it's operating as ECC. It's supposed to have 4 gigs of RAM. The fact that I have 5 packages seems to imply some form of parity calculation. Alright, that's that. So I can see all my SFP plus ports are here. These are my SFP 28 ports, which are, by the way, backwards compatible with SFP modules. So you could run this with 2 additional 10 gig ports with the correct modules there. Here's our actual power supplies. These are AC to DC converters. Input 100 to 240 volts AC, 50 to 60 hertz, 1.5 amp. Output 12 volts DC, 5 amp. And, well, that's interesting. The print on this one is different than this one, although they appear to be the same model. They're both CB60A-S12-G. So one of these is a newer revision. Not sure which one. CHMEC Chimec for the main capacitor there. Well, I said I didn't have a reason to remove the power supply or the heatsink. Now I guess I do. I want to see what's under there. All right. So we have got a dual heat pipe design. Actually, that's fairly impressive looking. And then I'm going to just set it right there. I can't quite read the CPU model upside down. I think I need to clean it off. Okay, so that is a Annapurna Labs, which is an Amazon company apparently. T405603001A. Gonna clean it off a little bit, and we'll get a photo of it with the Yokio cam. Just a minute. This is one of those ones, the print is so tiny and it is so reflective I can barely read it. With that out of the way, I do have 5 memory modules. The printed circuit board, CCR2004-1G-12S plus 2XS. I've got my MAC addresses listed, my serial number, Mikrotik SIA, Rigo Latvia, etc. We've got a couple of unpopulated headers for SPI and I2C communication. And it looks like there's also a fan 3 that's not used. Those probably ended up being something that they thought they'd need in testing that they didn't. If I was to guess, I would say originally there was a fan here, and this heatsink came later in development. So what else do we have that's of note here? I've got a NAND chip here. I've got my RAM there. Let's go ahead and check the specs and see if there's anything exciting. Okay, so it is ECC RAM. It does list that the RAM is ECC. There is an interesting note here, and that is that Router OS v6 is only going to address 1,792 megabytes for version 6, and will address the full 4 gigs as of version 7. It lists this as an AL32400, which is a quad-core ARM CPU at 1700 megahertz. This does come with a Router OS Level 6 license, which means that it can do anything and everything with no limits imposed as far as the software is concerned. And we have, I believe this is 128 megs of NAND. The suggested price is $595, max power consumption 49 watts, 32 without attachments, 2 fans. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. We've got all the things that we want for a typical small business router, and this is the kind of thing where I have to say that this is not Mikrotik's hardware for today. This is Mikrotik's hardware for tomorrow. And what I mean by that is the 1016, the 1009, the 1036, the 1072, those are all Tile CPU devices. There's no new Tile CPUs that they're looking to deploy for anything currently. This is, I think, their first 64-bit ARM device, and there's a whole line of the CCR2000 devices that had been leaked so far, and there's some that I'm really interested to see. There was one that had 40 gig ports on it, which I would love to get my hands on, but hasn't launched yet. At least if I can decode their model numbers. And I'll see if I can grab the list of those and dig it up on the forum. They may have taken it down, but it was mentioned in their router, one of their Router OS v7 builds. That's why we know that they're at least on the drawing board. So this is their first foray into 64-bit ARM. I think this is their first use of an Annapurna Labs chip. I can't take the PCB out on this because I do have to put this in. And my concern here, number one, is that I've taken the PCB out of a bunch of these, and there's usually nothing exciting on the backside of the PCB. But I don't want to break any of these plastic pieces that are leading up to the front where the LEDs are attached. And, you know, people don't like spending $600 on stuff and then I install something with broken parts. So we're going to have to skip that part. And now I just need to re-secure the heatsink to the chassis. And then put the lid back on and we can see how much, if any, noise this makes. I kind of anticipate that this is going to be like the CRS317s, which are another device of theirs that I've used extensively, and mine run in a completely fanless mode. And that's not to say that everyone's will, but the 317 is built similarly to what we're seeing here. There's a large heatsink that extends through the chassis, and then there's a couple of fans in it as sort of like a just in case. And the 317 is a 16-port 10 gig switch. Mine basically just route 10 gig traffic and off they go. Now, my environment's fairly open air for the location of the server rack. It's in a basement, and there's just, you know, hundreds if not thousands of square feet of open air and ceilings that are 20 foot high for the heat to go away. It's typically, you know, about 60 down there, regardless of the time of year. So that's probably as close to a best case scenario as you're going to get for a passively cooled device like this. Now, my studio today is about 85 degrees Fahrenheit, so a bit warmer than where my 317s are, but not terribly so. And not enough that I think that it should really impact this. I'm going to plug this in to my kilowatt, and we're just going to hook up power 1. I love this latch mechanism, by the way. I wish consumer power supplies for desktop PCs and just about anything that used this would start including these, because this allows me to plug it in and then fold this down. And now I can't plug it out, unplug it unintentionally. That's it. Wow. So the fans are on, or the unit's on. Power 1 is lit, and that was it. Although I'm not willing to promise you that those fans are always going to be off, if you have a relatively temperature-controlled space, I don't see any reason why they would spin up either. And I'll keep an eye on this once it's installed, and do a follow-up in one of my news roundups and say, you know, I've got it under X amount load and the fans still aren't doing anything, or, you know, the fans are running at 500 RPM with a space temperature of 90 degrees type thing. But wow, that's it. That is, oh, let's listen to it one more time so I don't talk over it. And by the way, it's running at about 15 watts right now. That's really interesting. So this time, they didn't stop. Well, if this is as loud as they're going to be, I'm still fairly impressed that, yeah. They don't feel warm at all. I'll keep an eye on the fan noise out of this. Honestly, if you put it, you know, 10 feet away, you're not going to hear it. So, well, let's just reboot it one more time to see if we get different behavior again. Yeah. Okay. So I guess the first time was a fluke, although you could probably configure it to be fanless inside its console. I know they've got some options inside there. I don't think it's actually dissipating enough heat that it really needs those fans, but that could be off there. So just a quick, you know, reiteration. This is a quad-core 1.7 gigahertz ARM device. You get we'll say 1.8 gigs of RAM, just for an even number, under Router OS 6 and 4 gigs under Router OS 7. Router OS 7 is still in beta today. There's been a couple of releases of it, and as of right now, the most recent version is 7.1 beta 4, which is not quite 100% ready, And there's a couple of BGP features that they're still adding. However, it's... Oh, there went the fans. Huh. Well, maybe it will run fanless. I don't know. Anyway, so Router OS 7 is not quite ready for prime time with some of the routing filters, but most of what you need is there. I'm going to end up running this on Router OS 6 today because I want consistency in the stack. And what that means is that the 1016s I have no, or sorry, 1032s I have no reason to consider moving those to Router OS 7 yet. Since they don't have any features that are locked behind the new software version. And honestly, just shy of 2 gigs of RAM is plenty for the route tables that this is going to have to hold. Yeah, those aren't spinning at all. And that heatsink's not even warm to the touch. I mean, I guess why would it with a 15.8 watt load? So, anyway. As always, I want to thank anyone who helps support Pocketables, be it by using our Amazon affiliate links or through Patreon or simply subscribing to the channel. It's support like that that helps make videos like this one possible. I want to thank Electrix, as always, for providing our opening and closing themes. And finally, thank you for watching.